Welcome to the Small Business Edge podcast with Brian Moran. Now here's your host, Brian Moran.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Mother's Day edition of the Small Business Edge podcast. I'm your host, Brian Moran, and today I want to welcome Grace Davy Moran to the show. She is my mother. Hello, Mom.
Hello, Brian.
So is this like one of the worst days of your life where I'm actually in control of the conversation?
I am not anticipating this with much glee, I'll say that.
Mom, I have dreamed about this moment for many, many, many years. So remember all those ends that I got in self-control? Well, let's see if I can improve them with this podcast. Actually, Mom, I wanted to do a podcast with you because I think you have some great pieces of advice and wisdom that you can share with a lot of our listeners who are men and women, business owners and professionals.
Well, I hope so.
All right. So here's how it's going to go. So we're going to do the podcast in 3 segments. I want to talk a little bit about your background, kind of set the stage. I want to talk a little bit about your charitable work. And then we're going to kind of pivot into lessons learned and lessons shared over the years. All right.
Right.
All right. So you are the oldest of 8 children. There were 5 boys and 3 girls.
That's right.
And I know your siblings. So the question is, as the leader of that pack, how did your upbringing shape your life and your professional career?
Well, I guess as the oldest child, everything I've ever read about your place in a family kind of determines your personality seems to have been true.
All right.
I was probably the most responsible of my siblings.
Do you think Jimmy would agree with that? And maybe Dennis?
He's not a competitor for the most responsible.
Okay. All right. You met Dad at 19 when you were in college. You got married at 21 and graduated from Fordham. You then went on to have 7 children, 6 boys and a girl. My memories of childhood, at least some of them, were you being president of the Parent Teachers Association, working on local elections, and of course, volunteering your Army unit of children on food and clothing drives. So the question I always had is, when did you find time to sleep? August?
I don't know that it wasn't, it just seemed to be the things that one did. I couldn't send 7 children to school and not be involved in the PTA.
Right.
Some obligation to contribute. So I did.
So were most other mothers in similar situations?
I would think so. Yes. Yeah. I think that was an era when large families was not unusual.
Right. Especially in our town.
Came from large families.
Right. I would agree with that. I thought that was the norm. I thought every family had 6, 7, 10 children.
Well, in this town, everyone did.
Did anybody check the water tables and see if there was something in the water? Okay. So when Colin, who's your youngest, was, I think he was 3 or 4 years old, you decided to go to law school, and you were probably about 33, 34 years old. Was this more of a calling, or was it just an excuse for you to get out of the house?
I joke that if you fail at one thing, you try another. But actually, when I graduated from Fordham, it would have been very difficult to go to law school because you really only had 1 or 2 women in a law school class. Mm-hmm. By 1975, when I decided to go, I think my class was at least 8% women. But I was 37 years old when I started law school.
I'm blaming Mark. I asked him to do some research for me on this, and this is what he gave to me. So, okay. So you go to law school, and you did well in law school. You were invited to law review second year. You chose to turn it down. because it just meant additional hours, which you didn't have.
That's correct.
Right. After school, you did some work in Dad's law firm, but then you joined the 10th Appellate Division Grievance Committee.
Right.
What made you choose public service?
I thought it would be interesting when this opportunity arose, and I learned about it. It was the professional discipline of the legal profession. So I was something of a prosecutor for attorneys gone bad, but it was very interesting work. And I enjoyed it. When I took the job, I thought I'd be there maybe 2 or 3 years, and I ended up spending over 20 years there because it was very interesting work.
Now this is where we get into the good.
I'm sorry, what?
No, this is where we get into the good part because I know you're humble and you hate talking about yourself. So let me talk about you just for 2 minutes. You eventually became the first woman to become chief counsel of the Grievance Committee, which oversees Long Island. You also became the first woman president of the Nassau County Bar Association in 1994. And that was the bar was started in 1899. So it was 95 years before they had a woman president. And lastly, you were the 77th recipient of the Distinguished Service Medallion, which is the highest honor given by the Nassau County Bar Association. Now, I want to just read because I went and I looked at who some of the past recipients were of this medallion, and there were 76 people before you, including Herbert Hoover, Dwight Eisenhower, Nelson Rockefeller, Thurgood Marshall, Antonin Scalia, and then a number of women. You were the 5th woman to receive it, but 2 people that I know I think hold in high regard, Beatrice Burstein and Marie Santagata. Santagata, excuse me. Again, that was Mark giving me the phonetic sound of her name. What did it mean to be part of that group of people who were recognized for their lifelong service?
Well, I was quite surprised when I got the phone call telling me that I had been selected by the committee for the award. But then I looked up the past recipients, Eisenhower and, Thurgood Marshall and the others. And I said, oh, I belong in that group.
Well, sure. Why not?
Actually, that was terrifying. The idea that I would be selected for that. I knew it would be, I just did not feel that I was a worthy recipient.
But there were a lot of glass ceiling moments in your career. Like I mentioned, first woman president of the bar, first woman to head up the 10th Appellate Division. Did you recognize them as glass ceiling moments at the time, or was that just part of what your like expected career path was?
No, I did not have a goal. I simply got up each day and tried to do my best and see where it led or what happened. But I did see it as a glass ceiling moment. Yes, becoming the first woman president. I knew that as long as I did a decent job, there would be several women coming after me. And indeed there were. Right.
But I think the silver medallion was recognition for the work that you did. And I think you underplay the impact that you had in the legal profession. I know that you spoke significantly around the country and around New York State about professional ethics and conduct to try and keep the standards of the legal profession as high as they possibly could.
Yeah, I did. Well, that was part of the job was lecturing to bar associations and community groups and things like that. So I did that, but just about everybody I worked with had to take on that kind of public education.
Okay. I want to pivot now to a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about charitable work, and then we'll get into the lessons learned. So I referred earlier to you volunteering your Army unit of children. I remember going, it was like every Saturday. It would be funny. Every Saturday, right? Okay, get in the car. And you would hustle 6 or 7 kids into the car. Okay, where are we going today? And then I remember there was one house where there was literally a mountain of clothes. And you said, okay, we need to parcel this up, put them in bags and ship them off somewhere. Like, Ma, I got a baseball game at 11 o'clock. You'll make it. Start working. And then, but there were so many times like that. What?
There weren't that many times. It wasn't every Saturday. You might have done it a dozen times. There were trucks that came. There was a woman who collected clothes for Appalachia.
Right.
And she was older and she couldn't possibly load these trucks by herself. And I had these 6 boys that were quite capable of moving the clothes into cartons and putting them on the truck. So I volunteered you.
And then, of course, every winter when it snowed, 5, 6, 10 inches, we would go out and all my friends and my brother's friends would all go out and they would make $5, $10, even $20 for a driveway. And you would line us up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay, you have to do this house. You have to do this house. You have to do this house. And absolutely do not take any money from them.
Well, that was the older people on our block who
Right.
could possibly go out and shovel their own walks and driveways. So, and what I think is good is that now people on this block are having their children come and shovel my walk and my.
All right. All right. Well, there's other charitable work you did, which I want to recognize. Just I remember things like, well, you sat on the board of 2 hospitals. You have the school in Freeport that you work with, right? And you've driven. When I was younger, remember you driving for cerebral palsy,
Right.
Right. So I guess the question I have is, given your workload between work and personal life, why was the charitable aspect such an important part of your life's foundation? I mean, no one would have accused you of slacking if you said, I don't have the time to do this or that, whether it's the PTA or volunteering your kids or doing this other work for the schools, the hospitals, cerebral palsy.
I think we all have to contribute something for the space we're taking up on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I had the time, but I did have the time. And people would call and say they needed a volunteer for this or that. And I would try to do it. I would contribute my share.
Was that part of your DNA? Is that something you learned from your parents? Or did you just figure it was a good excuse to get your kids out of the house?
I didn't think of it at the time as being anything extraordinary. It was just, and I don't think I was alone. I think that I knew the women that I hung out with, so to speak, were usually women who worked. They were not ladies who lunched, and they would be involved in various charitable or community activities. And I just kind of followed along.
Or led.
It was the way things were. That was
Right. Okay. I want to now talk about lessons learned. So the lessons learned and the lessons that you shared over the years. I know that many women and men attorneys sought your advice over the years on how to be better attorneys or even better leaders. Do you remember any of the nuggets of wisdom that you shared with them?
I remember putting into my lecture something I learned from my job, and that was that probably the most dangerous clients an attorney could have would be a relative or a long-term friend, because then they would kind of relax the professional distancing and I think an attorney has to do. And they wouldn't put everything into writing. They would treat it as a friendship, or as, as somebody that they were concerned about and overly concerned about, perhaps. And as a result, if something went bad and the relative or the long-term friend turned on them, they were just devastated. And they didn't have the necessary writings and in other words, they didn't act as 100% as an attorney. They were acting as 40% attorney, and the rest of it was friendship or love for a sibling. And invariably, the attorney was in serious trouble.
Yeah. Do you think the same applies for Long Island contractors?
You're talking about your brother?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, poor Colin. He became the Mr. Fix-It for the entire family. He can fix anything. He's a mechanic. He's a contractor. He took computers for a couple of years. There's nothing he can't fix.
Right. He is our plow horse.
The whole family knows it.
He is our plow horse.
He is.
The biggest regret I have from moving from Long Island to New Jersey is that Colin has this aversion to crossing the George Washington Bridge.
Don't we all?
Yeah, I tell him it's not, 2 planes and a train to get to my house. You can get here in under an hour. But he seems to have his workload filled with just his siblings on Long Island. Okay, so recently, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. I did a podcast before this one about the pandemic's effect on women in the workforce, and it's been almost devastating. About 5 million women have left the workforce. And in fact, we're at numbers now that we haven't seen since 1988. And a number of the women who left the workforce said it was just simply impossible to do everything that needed to be done, meaning that they were working from home, their spouses were working from home, and their children were home from school, homeschooled on Zoom. And so it made it almost impossible to do everything, successfully. And so they chose to give up their job and focus on their families for now. Others were burnt out too. What advice would you give to those women who left the workforce because they chose the family over their career?
I don't know I'm the best person to do this because when you and your siblings were young, not in school or in grade school, most families had only one breadwinner.
Mm-hmm.
Women didn't, quote, have to work.
Right.
Nowadays, most families need 2 breadwinners. So this is a very difficult situation for these women. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think, from observing my grandchildren, the ones that were in the public schools, as opposed to the private schools, seem to have opened, and they had in-person for the most part teaching. But those Zoom classrooms didn't seem to work that well. And in fact, in our family, the grandchildren who were working remotely in school just were going nowhere. I mean, they didn't seem to be learning very much at all. And consequently, someone in the family, I think it was your sister, organized a tutoring session especially with the college students. The ones that were very good in math and science taught that. The ones who were good in English, taught grammar, and then they selected books for them to read. So in effect, for the better part of a year, the grandchildren had special tutoring from from college students who were good at it. if you didn't have that kind of family support, I think that a mother trying to work remotely and trying to, help her children who were working remotely, it would have been 3 full-time jobs.
Right.
This would have been impossible. And I think that I also there were the women who, for instance, nursing or being a policewoman, or I think that those jobs can't be done remotely.
Right.
So how you cannot leave, young children, preteens, home alone. That is irresponsible.
Right.
A lot of them had no choice. I mean, it became the husband and wife would have to sit down and figure out whose job was going to be pursued, and the other one was not going to work.
Right.
It was the only way to work it out.
Right. And then there are these single mothers who have 2, 3, 4 children and who are trying to balance that as well. And I always said that I think the government needs to recognize them independently and provide some sort of assistance to them, at least for like a bridge between now and when things start to reopen.
Well, I think at this point, the pandemic is virtually over. So that
in the United States
open up in the fall.
Right.
And things will get back to something similar to normal life. But it's just been a very, very difficult, almost impossible situation for, as you say, the single mothers.
Right. Just a side note too, because I get asked about this a lot. I often speak about people in underrepresented communities and minority business owners and the people who, are looking for equality and equity and diversity and inclusion. And I often will support those efforts. And they say, well, where did all of this come from? I said, well, in my house, there were 9 people. There were 7 men and 2 women. And I saw that, I saw in my own house the inequality. And I said, the 7 men often had to fight just to get a voice with management. The 2 women who ran our household were dictators. It was very, very difficult.
I said to someone, I think Siobhan, your sister Siobhan, has become the strong woman she is and the incredibly good attorney, from my observation. She owes to her brothers.
She does. And she tells me that every day, by the way. Siobhan, I love your emails. Keep them coming.
The boys really toughened her up.
No doubt. She was very soft growing up. For those of you who don't know my sister, and it took years of molding and counseling and good advice, but she really came around.
Well, I remember one time after dinner, I said something about, all right, I want you to clear the table or something. And Jamie said, that's women's work, or that's a girl's job. And Siobhan announced, and we don't have enough girls. Get up.
So speaking of daughters, granddaughters, you have 13 granddaughters who all seem to be ambitious, bright, hardworking. What are some of the things that you're telling them? I know they look up to you, they revere you, they joke around with you, but I've asked my kids often, what did you talk to Nana about today? And they will tell me these insightful things about work and about life. So what are you telling them right now about their futures?
I remember something my great-grandmother, who lived till I was 19 years old. I remember something she said to me once. I asked her why she had been born in Ireland. And I asked her why she never spoke about what her family endured in Ireland. She came to this country in 1861 or 2. And she said, because I said, there was such oppression and there was such famine, and the occupation by Britain was so horrible for them. I said, why didn't you ever speak about that? And she said, there is no glory in being a victim.
Wow.
And she felt that was an embarrassment, that there should have been a revolution much sooner than it occurred. But then when I started reading Irish history, I realized there was a revolution. I mean, there was a rebellion every 20 or 25 years there.
Right.
And but that was something I thought, I've just kept that to myself all my life, that don't whine, do something about it, but don't whine.
Right. Right.
I think that's something that I hope the granddaughters in particular, have learned that. But the other part is that in your early years, and this I've heard Siobhan talking to people about this, in your early years when you're out of college and you're deciding what you're going to do with your life, that is the time to put in the foundation. I heard Siobhan yelling one time at one of her cousins that who was complaining that she was working 60 hours a week or something at her career. And she said, you're 22 years old. That's when you do that.
Right. Right.
So if you're going to build a foundation, do it in your early 20s when you have the energy and maybe not any other responsibilities.
That's great advice. Do you give you have 9 grandsons too, so you have a total of 22 grandchildren. Are you telling them the same things? Are you telling them anything different?
No, I think it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Depending on, I don't mean that you have to have a career. There may be people who just want a job,
Right.
So that's fine. Find out what it is that works best for you. And then pursue it. But if you're going to pursue it, party time should not be your early 20s. That should be when you're really building, as I say, a foundation.
Right. Right. All right. We're in the home stretch, Mom, of our podcast. And I'm going to put you on the hot seat with 5 questions. All right. And I should have said early on that my mother had asked for complete editorial control over this podcast. We have agreed in principle to giving her only partial editorial control. Is that right?
No, I thought I had full.
No. Okay. So 5 questions real quick. What's the secret to life? What's the secret to a happy life?
Don't pursue happiness. Pursue doing your part. You're making your contributions. Happiness will follow. But happiness is not a goal.
Okay. I love that. Best advice you ever received from your parents?
I guess it was my father who, I used to joke that the reason I am so complicated is because my mother always worried about what the neighbors would think, and my father barely knew we had any. He was a man an engineer who pursued what he thought was best and was not deterred by what other people's opinion were.
Yes.
And I don't understand. I found too that as I grew older, the only opinions I respect are from people I respect.
Right. Right.
You hear a lot of things of, like, for instance, news today it seems you turn on the television, you're getting somebody's opinion.
Right.
These people, how can I respect them? I don't know if they know what they're talking about.
Right. We long for the days of Tim Russert and Walter Cronkite and Jimmy Breslin and Pete Hamill and Mike Royko, right?
People who you respected. You read their columns and you thought, hey, this is good stuff.
Right. Absolutely. By the way, I still hear, when I think about Mary and Pop, my grandparents, my mother's parents, Pop was probably one of the funniest people I ever met, and I don't think he intended to be funny. That was the best part about him. But Mary, some of the things, oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, the neighbors are going to think we're all crazy. Right?
Well, we probably were.
Right. That was great. All right. Best advice you ever gave to your kids?
Keep your head down and your mouth shut.
Well, that was for me. But I think that wouldn't have gone too well with Matthew because that's all he ever did.
No, that's true. You were the one I told when you started Chaminade. I said, all right, good. You get in there, you keep your head down and your mouth shut.
Right. You had your master's in reverse psychology with me. That goes without saying. I will say this. The best advice you ever gave me was the only security you will ever need in life is between your ears.
That's true.
And then I went to the bank and they asked me for security. And I went, hold on 1 second. I started unscrewing my head. I said, it's in there somewhere.
Yeah, that is, I forgot about that. Yeah.
That has actually helped me quite a bit in life because you also realize that things are temporary. The mountaintop moments don't last, but neither do the valleys.
This is true.
Yeah. Your proudest accomplishment in life?
I think it's definitely raising the kids, all of whom turned out to be responsible adults. That is, if that had gone bad, then nothing else would have mattered. That's
true. All right. And the last question, is it true that I'm really your favorite child? Da, 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 da. All right. Well, we're out of time, Mom. We're going to have to save that for the next podcast. I'm kidding. I know I'm your favorite, but we don't have to tell anybody.
Brian, favorite is a tough decision, but you were definitely the most worrisome. But you were the big risk taker. Like the time the Good Human Man was here, and
this is not my life, Mom. This is your life. We don't have to.
The Good Human Man was selling the ice cream out of the back of the truck, but he left the key in the ignition.
Yes.
The next thing he knew, you were 5 years old. You were in the truck and driving it down the block, and he was racing after you.
And he caught me before I hit the wall.
When you got older, you built that Evel Knievel ramp.
Yeah.
And you could bike up it to jump over 3 or 4 garbage cans. That didn't turn out so well.
So, Mom, my listeners know none of this. They think I'm a responsible adult.
You were responsible for them dismantling the monkey bars at the school.
When I fell off.
Yeah, but you fell off. Yes. Because the other kids would only go to the second or third rung. You had to go all the way to the top.
Right.
So, I mean, you were the big risk taker.
Right.
And then that truly the most worrisome child.
Well,
and the doctors would say to me, no, he's well within the range of normal. And I would say, fine, then tranquilize me.
All right. So this is not, we're not going to turn this in. When you get your own podcast, you can interview me and we can talk about all of the things. You know, Mom, I think I should take a lot of credit for your success because I really did keep you on your toes. I mean, when you had those lawyers come before you, they were nothing compared to what you were dealing with at home, correct?
It's true. This is true.
Right. And Siobhan, the same thing. She owes me a lot of credit. But she thanks me profusely on a weekly basis. So I appreciate that. Siobhan, you don't have to send any more of those emails. Thank you for them, though. I appreciate all the love. All right, Mom, this is great. So this is going to be our Mother's Day Small Business Edge podcast. I want to thank you for being a great mom. You did a hell of a job. And it's funny, we saw all the day-to-day stuff growing up and what it took to get us dressed and to church every Sunday or to our swimming lessons, during the week when we were kids. And I just assumed that was every family. And then you go out into the world and you realize, no, that woman is pretty incredible. Where did she hang up her Superwoman cape? So thank you for everything. And thank you for keeping me alive for the first 18 years of my life.
Well, I used to say, if I keep them alive and out of jail till they're 21, I'm a success.
And not one of us ever spent a night behind bars.
This is true.
Convicted? Never. All right. I want to wish all of the other moms out there listening, I want to wish you all a happy Mother's Day and all the best as we continue to reopen the country and get our lives back into full swing and everything that goes with it. Again, Mom, any final words before we say goodbye?
No, thank you, Brian.
You're welcome, Mom. This was fun. Let's do it again. Maybe next Mother's Day.
Maybe we can edit this down to about 5 minutes.
That can happen. I promise you. I know already some people who are going to say you got to have your mom back on as a regular.
Right. I think so.
We could do this. All right, Mom. I'll see you maybe tomorrow. And I wish everybody happy Mother's Day to the women out there. And to all our listeners and viewers, thank you again for your comments, your suggestions, and your feedback. We appreciate that. So keep them coming and have a great day.
You've been listening to the Small Business Edge podcast with Brian Moran. Please visit our website, smallbusinessedge.com, for a listing of future podcasts.